This says go on, off.
Well, morning, everyone. I think we'd like to get started. First of all, on behalf of the MSRC, I'd like to welcome the participants in this webcast for the Local Government Partnership Program. We have folks who are attending here in person in Diamond Bar, and also folks who will be accessing this discussion via the internet. So again, welcome. And today the purpose is to really help answer any questions you have, any clarification you need relative to this funding opportunity. The MSRC is very excited about this and the partnership that we're forging with the South Coast Air Quality Management District. So again, I'd like to welcome you to this webcast. Again, the purpose really is to review the program opportunity notice that you have that has been provided to you, provide clarification. Today specifically what we're going to do is go over the broad overview of the program, discuss the eligible categories and the funding that's available from the MSRC. Cynthia, my colleague, will be doing some key program requirement and conditions and providing step-by-step participation instructions. My name is Ray Gorski. I am the technical advisor to the MSRC. And my position here is to really help develop some of these programs. And with me, of course, we have Cynthia Ravenstein, who is the overall MSRC program administrator. So if you participate in the program, you'll be primarily working with Cynthia and her staff and putting together a contract and implementing your projects. We have other staff members here today, Ms. Leah Alfaro and Matt McKenzie. Those will be your day-to-day points of contact when you participate in the Local Government Partnership Program. And again, we're available to answer questions either today or if you have something that comes up between now and the time that you submit your application, by all means, feel free to either pick up the phone or send us a question via the web. Now today, again, we have the opportunity to ask questions, and we'll provide answers in real time. On the screen, you'll have an email address for Cynthia, cravenstein@aqmd.gov. If you are watching this today, feel free to send an email, and we will address any question or provide additional clarification in real time. So there's no need to wait. If there's something that you'd like to hear now, by all means, we'll address it right now. The question that was originally asked is, why does the MSRC want to do this type of program at this time? And what we're trying to do is really recognize the work that's been conducted by the South Coast Air Quality Management District over the last couple of years when they were developing their 2016 Air Quality Management Plan. Now, this plan is truly the roadmap for how this region, which suffers from some of the worst air pollution in the country, is going to attain clean air for its citizens. There are key mobile source strategies included in the Air Quality Management Plan that the MSRC wants to help jumpstart, wants to help work with our partners, which some of our biggest partners are the cities and counties which comprise the South Coast District, but help you implement projects which really are in keeping with the strategies which have been identified as being most important and most effective in attaining clean air here in the South Coast region. The MSRC would like to obtain the highest level of participation on this program that we can. And for that reason, the MSRC has tried to make this as easy as possible to participate in. Your funding allocation, which you've been provided in the form of letters that have gone out to your city leadership and management, that money has already been allocated and set aside. It is there for the taking. There is no competition here. The funding that the MSRC has set aside is being dispersed on a pro rata basis, meaning that it's on a population basis. So your funding is there for you to take advantage of. And again, we're hoping that all the cities and counties that participate in the AB 2766 program do take advantage of this program, which the MSRC is making available. Also, I think the MSRC is trying to encourage you to leverage other types of funding which are available. And Cynthia, a little later in our presentation, will go over some of the other programs and highlight where on our website you can find other sources of money to leverage the MSRC funding which we're making available. Again, we're trying to make this easy. We're trying to make this such that it benefits your communities. We're trying to, most importantly, work with the district in jumpstarting those mobile source air pollution reduction strategies, which are deemed most effective and most essential for helping us meet our clean air obligations, which are rapidly approaching. If you look at what the Air Quality Management Plan says, we need a greater than 45% reduction in ozone precursor pollutants before 2023, and in all honesty, 2023 is right around the corner. So with that, we'd like to just start to go over some of the requirements and the overview of the local government partnership program. Firstly, again, this is open to cities and counties which are participants in the AB 2766 Subvention Fund program. That's the motor vehicle registration fees which are subvened to your city or county. They're provided on a quarterly basis from the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and there's a lot of conditions, of course, as to how that money is to be invested. It's specifically focused on reducing pollution from mobile sources, which are automobiles, buses, trucks, etc. We want to note that in addition to the MSRC funding that we will provide, plus the AB 2766 subvention funds, you can partner with other agencies and neighboring cities if you choose to. Again, trying to make this as flexible as possible, you may want to look at joint needs between you and your neighboring jurisdictions to see if there's a program that you may want to put together that includes yourself plus your partners. You'll note that in section 3.3 of the PON, we describe some of the very simple conditions that must be adhered to if you do want to enter into a partnering agreement. But again, our real purpose here is to take and try to maximize the effectiveness of the monies and leverage other colors of money to the extent feasible, and encourage you folks to partner if it makes sense on larger scale projects. To go over the eligible projects, the focus again is truly on those strategies which have been identified from the South Coast Air Quality Management District of being most effective in reducing mobile source air pollution. And you'll note that there are two sets of categories which are described in the PON. One is an eligible project set for those cities and counties that receive an MSRC allocation which is greater than $50,000. And then there is a second additional set of projects which are available to those cities which receive only $50,000. Again, this money is being dispersed on a pro rata basis based on population. However, there are some cities which are frankly so small that it would be difficult for them to do a meaningful project given the amount of AB 2766 subvention funds that they receive on an annual basis. In those cases, the MSRC upped our contribution to $50,000 to again allow smaller cities to implement projects which are meaningful. So the lowest amount of money that a city will get when they participate in the MSRC program is a contribution of $50,000 from the MSRC. If you're a larger city with a greater population, well then of course you'll receive a funding amount which is on par with what you receive under your motor vehicle registration fee subvention program. Again, you should have received via email a letter which said specifically what your MSRC set aside your allocation is. If you have not, by all means, let us know and we will make that available to you. So to talk about some of the project categories, firstly, again, this is focused on AQMP mobile source strategies, which are deemed most effective. So you'll see that in this MSRC opportunity, there is a very, very strong emphasis on zero emission and near zero emission motor vehicles and the enabling infrastructure to support them. The first category is light duty zero emission vehicles. Those are electric automobiles for all intents and purposes, and some of the smaller light duty trucks. They have a gross vehicle weight rating that's defined as less than or equal to 8,500 pounds GVWR. But again, for all intents and purposes, these are the types of automobiles and again, light duty trucks that a municipality might use within your public works or in other areas within your city or county government. The MSRC is offering to provide you an incentive under the local government partnership program of up to 50% of the net purchase price, quote unquote, of that vehicle, up to a maximum of $10,000 per vehicle. And I just want to clarify, because you'll see this terminology throughout the PON, the Program Opportunity Notice that you've been provided. The net purchase price is the price of the vehicle after any manufacturer or federal or other state rebate which is applied to it. So if you, for all intents, or if you, for example, buy an electric car and that car comes with a rebate that's offered from the state, and then potentially you have another opportunity to get some incentive money. Well, it's the net remaining amount that the MSRC will help subsidize. We want you to, of course, leverage your monies to the extent possible, but we certainly don't want to provide an incentive which is greater than the actual purchase price of that car once all the incentives are taken into account. So it's the net purchase price, but the MSRC, again, will allow you to use the money that we're providing you to purchase 50% of the price up to a maximum for a light-duty vehicle of $10,000. Now, for medium and heavy-duty vehicles, again, this is the class of vehicles which are larger pickup trucks and anything larger than that. They have a gross vehicle weight rating of 8,501 pounds or greater. In this case, the MSRC will allow our funds to be used to purchase up to 50% of that net purchase price, or up to $100,000 per vehicle, whichever is less. So if you're looking at potentially buying some zero emission buses or other zero emission vehicles which are entering the marketplace, this is a great opportunity to take advantage of up to $100,000 of incentive money, again, based upon how much you have allocated to you from the MSRC. Near zero is a strategy which is very attractive because it gets very close to zero emissions, but it's not quite there. However, the cost of near zero engines and vehicles tend to be relatively on par or slightly higher than what you'd pay for a traditional diesel or gasoline vehicle. So we have a category for heavy duty near zero vehicles, and this would include things like, for example, natural gas trash trucks or other heavy duty municipal vehicles that can operate, for example, on compressed natural gas. I know that a lot of cities and counties have already made substantial investments in their CNG infrastructure. This would be an opportunity to either repower, that is, replace the engine of an older vehicle, or purchase a new vehicle which is equipped with a, quote, near zero engine. Now, there are several manufacturers who currently offer near zero product. There are other manufacturers that will probably be entering the marketplace over the next year or so, the next model year. For example, Cummins offers their near zero natural gas engines, as does a company called Greencraft, which has recently certified an 8.0 liter natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas, which is propane, to the near zero standard of 0.02 gram per brake horsepower hour. So the amount of product entering the marketplace is growing. And again, this is a great opportunity for a city that needs to replace the engine on an older vehicle that's already natural gas, or if you're looking to expand your natural gas heavy duty fleet, if you purchase one that is equipped with a near zero engine, well then again, you can take advantage of the money which the MSRC has set aside for you. Now, again, infrastructure is an enabling element of any clean fuel strategy. And the MSRC for the last 25 years has been at the forefront of providing funding for alternative fuel and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And this program continues down that path. If you are looking to put in electric vehicle charging infrastructure, commonly referred to as EVSE, the MSRC will allow you to use the money that we're providing you to pay for up to 75% of the cost of that EVSE if it's a publicly accessible charging station. Now, we understand that some cities and counties do have restrictions on access to their facilities. That's recognized. So if you need to install electric vehicle charging for your own city fleet or for areas which are restricted and not accessible to the public, that's okay too. However, the MSRC will pay only up to 50% of the total cost of emplacing that EVSE. So 50%, half the cost, and that includes construction, that includes the procurement of the EVSE units. It's the total cost. So 50% if it's going to be accessible to the city only, but if you're willing to make it publicly accessible, the MSRC will pay up to 75% of that total cost. That's a pretty good deal. And if you look at what the South Coast District's SCAQMP says about the need for increasing the numbers of electric vehicles which are in place throughout the South Coast region. You can't have larger fleets of EVs if you don't have the supporting infrastructure to help them recharge. So again, there's a big focus here on putting in that enabling EVSE to allow the numbers of electric vehicles to grow throughout the region. And finally, alternative fuel. The MSRC, again, for the last quarter century has been at the forefront of helping cities in place alternative fuel, primarily those which are associated with liquefied and compressed natural gas. The opportunity here expands upon that to include hydrogen fuel. There are increasing number of hydrogen-powered vehicles which are going to be entering the marketplace, as well as fuel cell vehicles for the heavier duty types of vehicles. The MSRC, if it's a private access station, the MSRC will contribute up to 25% of the total cost of that infrastructure, again for natural gas or hydrogen, up to a maximum of $350,000 per station. Now, if you have a lot of money and you want to do multiple stations, well, again, that's fine. It's the $350,000 is a per station allocation. So it can be more if you have multiple stations. Again, that's for private access that you do not open to the general public. If you do have a station which has public accessibility, then you're entitled to up to 50% of the total cost, not to exceed a maximum of $500,000 per station. And there's been some questions as to, what constitutes public access. The MSRC views public access as being available to any user 24 hours a day, 7 days per week. So anytime someone needs to access that fuel, it is available to them. One thing that can be done, of course, is that your station can have multiple refueling dispensers, one of them being made publicly accessible. So as long as that station that you in place has a dispenser which is accessible to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can earn up to the 50%, up to $500,000 per station. But again, if that station needs to be a secured location or cannot be made available 24/7, again, the MSRC still wants to work with you and will fund up to $350,000 or 25% of the station, whichever is less. The question was, how does that work if you're charging for the fuel? The MSRC does not have any prohibition on retail sales of fuel. We're helping to buy down the cost of in placing new or expanded construction. So there's no prohibition if you have a fuel purchase agreement or if you have other retail mechanisms to purchase fuel from that station. Carol, does that answer your question? Okay. Okay. Sure, I'm at. Good. Now, again, the MSRC recognizes that if you're a very small city that receives a relatively small amount of AB 2766 subvention funds because you have a relatively small population, that's sometimes difficult to think about, opening up a station which has access and a $500,000 contribution. You just don't have that much money at your disposal. So to help smaller entities which receive less money in place projects which are beneficial to the region. If you're a small city, there are other opportunities that the MSRC is making available to you. And if you review section 2B2 on page 4 of the PON, it talks about cities that receive $50,000 maximum and the other types of projects which are eligible under the local government partnership program. Specifically, those include traffic signal synchronization and coordination and bicycle active transportation projects, first mile, last mile transportation strategies. And again, these are all eligible if you're a smaller city that receives a maximum of $50,000. And there is a 50% co-funding requirement, meaning that the MSRC will pay for up to 50% of the total project cost. Now there's one thing I need to just clarify because it's come up a couple times. If, for example, you're a city and you receive $100,000, that's your MSRC set-aside funding allocation. you are in the category for projects that are in the greater than 50K, meaning that you cannot take $50,000 and do the projects which are allocated to the smaller communities. If you receive an allocation which is greater than $50,000, then you are to participate in the MSRC program required to implement those projects which are on the strategies for zero emission, near zero emission, and infrastructure. Um, the reason is because, again, the MSRC is trying to focus on those strategies which are the most important as identified by the South Coast region for mobile source air pollution reduction. And those are primarily zero and near zero emission vehicles and their supporting infrastructure. That's our focus here. So we really want all entities, even those that receive only $50,000, to see if there's an opportunity to move and purchase some vehicles or improve your infrastructure. Those are, again, the chief strategies for mobile source reduction and those that are the most highest priority for the MSRC. Now, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Cynthia Ravenstein, who's going to talk about some of the key program requirements and conditions to participate in the program. Cynthia is also going to briefly walk you through, again, a step-by-step process for participating. We're really trying to make this as easy as possible. If there's any questions, by all means, feel free to ask at any time. Yeah, absolutely, anytime.
Okay, we've got 4 questions. Let me start with the first one. The first one has a link to another website, and they're asking if this vehicle or other hybrids would count as medium heavy duty. Maybe you have to look at that link, Ray. So maybe we can come back to that if you want.
Oh, absolutely. We can come back to that one.
The next question is, if you install EV charging stations accessible to the public, can you charge for the energy, or does it have to be free to the public?
The answer is you can charge for the energy. The MSRC program is designed to help in place or assist in the construction, and there's no prohibition if there is a retail sale or other form of revenue to keep that station operational. So there'd be no prohibition.
Okay. The next question, Section 4, Subsection 3 of the PON discusses requirement for local agency council to adopt a resolution or minute action acknowledging receipt of 1, the presentation on the program, 2, authorizes a proposed project, and 3, allocates necessary matching funds. My question is that at this time, can the project proposal be general in nature? Can costs be estimates? We likely won't have the specifics dialed in by the time the council approves the required resolution.
I'm going to go off on a limb and basically say I think that would be okay. Again, what we're trying to achieve here is, in addition to giving out just the money to in place the projects, we're really trying to work with the district to educate the leadership of the jurisdictions that comprise the South Coast SCAQMD as to what the challenges are, and again, highlight the strategies that have been identified as the most effective by the South Coast District. So the purpose of giving that very brief, which we'll actually go over at the conclusion of today's presentation, but the real intent of that is, again, to just make sure that the leadership of the cities and counties are aware, first of all, that the MSRC is making this funding available to you, that we have, in fact, set it aside for you. Make sure that they're aware of the air quality challenges which are facing this region, especially when viewed in the context of the federal obligations to achieve certain reductions in pollution as early as 2023. And then, finally, we want to make sure that they're aware that they have money available to them and have the ability to authorize their staff to put together a project proposal. So to answer that entity's or individual's question, I think it would be okay as long as the minute action reflects that they've received the presentation and they've authorized their staff on behalf of their city or county to put together an eligible program project for submittal to the MSRC for consideration and hopefully the future entering into a contractual relationship. So, sure. Absolutely. The intent again is to utilize as many different types of funding to leverage the MSRC funding to the extent possible. We would again encourage all entities when you're viewing this opportunity to look at other types of money which are available, because there's a lot of money out there, frankly, and expand the project to the extent that is necessary for your jurisdiction. Again, the MSRC is willing to fund up to a certain percent, but if you can go above and beyond that through other contributions from other sources, by all means, please do that.
My apologies for that last question. My microphone was off. The question was, can they put more matching funds towards a project than they're receiving? And the answer, of course, as
Is
Mr.
yes.
Gorski said, was yes. Next question.
Oh.
Would the purchase of bike racks qualify for bicycle active transportation projects?
See what I wrote.
Bike stations, including bicycle lockers and racks, are eligible.
There you go.
I don't think we were able to hear that.
Okay.
The answer is, yeah, sure. The answer is yes. If you refer to on page 4, section or paragraph 2, under the bicycle active transportation, it specifically says that under sub-item D, bike stations, including bicycle lockers and racks, are eligible for that that category.
Okay, I think we have another one just popped up. Oh, that was one of our people with questions thanking you. Okay, I think that's all I've got for now. Thanks.
Okay, I think, can you folks hear me? Okay, great. So I'm just going to go over a few of the program requirements, sort of housekeeping stuff. The earliest date that you can begin a project and have it be eligible for funding. The earliest date essentially was the date that the solicitation was released, September 1st, 2017. And we're not going to count, maybe planning that you did to lead up to the project against you. And for some of these categories, this is a general MSRC policy when it comes to when a project can begin and be eligible for funding. For some of these categories, we already have a real hard and fast set date. For instance, if it involves the purchase of a vehicle, when you issue the purchase order, we're considered that you having started the project. So if you already issued a purchase order for a vehicle before September 1st, it would not be eligible for funding under this program. If you are installing infrastructure, it's a little more generous. If you break ground in some way, we consider that starting the program, starting the project. Other types of projects, we might need to look at on a case-by-case basis, but basically, the MSRC is not looking to fund something that was already happening, in the absence of this funding. They're hoping to encourage people to, do things a little bit sooner than they would have. And of course, if you do start on a project in advance of actually having received the award and executed the contract, you are proceeding at risk. The MSRC allows this You can get reimbursed for a project that you started before the contract was executed, as long as everything meets the requirements in the contract. So if you have some urgency and you need to move forward, you can do that, but we always recommend that if at all possible, you wait until you have executed your contract. In terms of completing the project, yeah, we are on the right one. This is actually very generous in this program. You have 60 months from the date the contract is executed to complete the work. And so, for the vast majority of projects, that should be more than sufficient. 60 months. We hope that it won't take nearly that long for most of these. We want to get these things out there and operational as soon as possible. In terms of reporting, it again depends a little bit on the project type, but the typical requirement is quarterly reporting until the project's complete, followed by a concise final report. There's an audit requirement. Any of these projects are subject to audit by state law. That doesn't mean you will be audited, but you might be audited. So we recommend that you follow standard government accounting practices. And there's a few additional requirements. Let me in terms of combining funding. Now we want you to leverage funding, but I guess somewhat the limitation on that is you can't leverage funding from multiple MSRC programs. There's another solicitation that's open right now for alternative fuel infrastructure. You can't get money from that and combine it with the money from the local partnership program. You're going to have to choose one or the other if you want to pursue one of those kind of projects, and we'd be happy to help you figure out, kind of the differences in those two programs. Or if you got funding for a project under a previous MSRC solicitation, or if we come out with something in the future, you can't put them together on the same project. Now, if you end up later expanding on a station that you put in, that might be considered a separate project. But for the initial project, you can't combine multiple programs. There's no increases available to the awards under any circumstances. Now, in this case, this is something somewhat new for the MSRC, that you already have for your jurisdiction a set-aside pot of money, and we're hoping that you're going to come in and take advantage of all of it. But if for some reason you didn't, if you said, well, I only want 75,000 of that 100,000, then later you can't come back and say, oh, no, I'd like the rest of it, or, my project cost more than I thought. Whatever you originally awarded, that is the maximum that you're going to get. We do allow reasonable project management costs as part of your budgets. If we deem something to be excessive, then we might reduce that somewhat. We don't usually see project management costs on things like vehicle purchases. That's just usually considered kind of your normal doing business. But we will allow some of those for some of these infrastructure projects. And the funds are distributed on a reimbursement basis. So you would have to, identify source of funding for your match and to cover the MSRC part initially, and then you could put in and get reimbursed for the MSRC amount. Can I have the clicker, or you want to do the next slide? Okay. All right. Now, in order to participate, Ray already made reference to the MSRC PowerPoint presentation. The PDF version is up on the MSRC website. It's actually listed like it's another solicitation. We have to work within the limitations of our current website, and there's only so many ways we can post things. So it's a separate posting under the solicitations is the PDF version. But if you would like to have the actual PowerPoint, by all means, email me. We'll send you the PowerPoint, and then you can modify that as you need. And again, Ray's going to be going over that presentation. We do need this presentation to be made to your city council or board of supervisors. It has to be actually presented. It can't be just included in the written materials as part of their consent calendar. We are trying to accomplish a bit of education here, but it is very brief and we think hopefully relatively painless. We tried to keep it pretty simple. And we're asking for a resolution or a minute action. Again, with no preference for resolution. I have a feeling those are harder to do. Just, even, the minutes from the meeting would be fine. That shows that the MSRC presentation was received, that they're authorizing the proposed project, and allocates any necessary matching funds. So that's what we're looking for in that documentation. Next one. Okay, we're also looking for you to prepare a project implementation plan. There's no format. There's not an application to fill out. These are just the elements we're looking for folks to prepare. It can be, whatever format suits you best. Describing what the project elements are, what work it is that you're proposing to do. And along with that, a project budget. Again, flexible on the format. We're looking for the cost information to be on a per project basis, especially some of the jurisdictions that have a little bit larger allocation may be choosing to do, more than one project with this, and we would like to have the cost broken down per project. Makes it a lot easier to write the contract when I'm going to be writing all these contracts. And lastly, a project implementation schedule, the anticipated completion dates of key milestones. And again, we are looking for projects to be completed within no more than 60 months from the date a contract is executed. When we send you a contract for execution, you're going to have 12 months to execute the contract. So if, and if there's any modifications that you want in what we send to you, that's going to need to be accomplished within that 12 months. So just so that these things don't kind of carry on forever, we do have to put somewhat of an endpoint on it. So next, the application will need to be submitted electronically via the MSRC website. There is a tutorial on the website for how to make a submission. I'm not going to walk through all the steps of that. You do have to be registered on the website, and then you can do a submission. If you have any problems, let me know. We're going to be having a new website that is going to be launching during this period. Unfortunately, we're going to try to make it as easy as possible, for you to still find all the same information, but things could move around a little bit. You have until, well, let me just back up a little bit. When you're making a submittal, basically all of the documentation that we need is going to need to be combined into one PDF. That's all that can be submitted via the website are PDFs. And so all those pieces need to be pulled together into one document and uploaded. And then we will have received the proposal. Now, the deadline for submitting these is March 2nd, 2018. I would encourage you to get them in a good deal earlier than that. Not that there's any chance of somebody else taking your funding. That funding is reserved for your jurisdiction. But in case there's any concern that perhaps some element that what you're proposing, might end up being deemed not eligible, you want to have time to be able to go back and resubmit. And, I'm not anticipating a lot of that coming up, but just in case, once the application period is closed, then, there's no time to go back and change things. And again, with that thought in mind, I would encourage folks, to talk with us before you even go to your council or board of supervisors. And, just if you have any doubts or worries, or just to talk with us first about what it is you're proposing to do, rather than go through all of that process and then find out, oh wow, we did this and what we're proposing to do wasn't eligible, and now we're going to have to go back and do it all again. It'd be much preferable, I think, for everybody if we can just kind of touch base ahead of time. Happy to do it. I don't mind questions at all. So I think that covers what, then our contact information. Of course, this is also in the solicitation. Feel free, anything that might cross your mind. No such thing as a dumb question.
Thank you very much. Mr. McKenzie, do we have any other questions that have been submitted via the electronic means?
Yes, we do, Ray. Thank you for asking. And some good ones, too. Concerning funding for the installation of EV charging, could we use our funds, and now in parentheses, 75% of total project cost for publicly accessible CNG stations in partnership with a private entity? For example, we fund 75% with MSRC funds and they pay the rest. And would the city need to be the owner of the station in this scenario, or could it be privately owned but publicly accessible?
I believe the answer is yes to both elements of that question, meaning that the co-funding can be brought in from a party other than their own funding or other government money. It can be private investment. There should be, to the best of my knowledge, no prohibition. And could you just, again, for the audience, repeat the second part of the question, Matt?
Would the city need to be the owner of the station in this scenario, or could it be privately owned but publicly accessible?
The city would not, I believe, need to be the owner per se. However, the contract will likely stipulate some minimum periods of time that the infrastructure, for example, needs to be available. So they would need to be cognizant of that. But again, I can't think of anything in and of itself that would be prohibitive by having the station or the infrastructure owned by another party. Again, as long as the city is willing to do that, and again, under the contract, would be willing to step up to those terms and conditions which are included, especially those which are relative to having the station operable for a certain amount of time.
And I'll just add that I think that we would certainly need to see at least some kind of documentation of the relationship with the property owner where the station would be in place, that they would be authorizing its to be placed there if it's not going to be on the local government's property. I think I'm not quite as sanguine as you about whether the city would need to own the equipment or not. In our alt fuel infrastructure solicitation, we do require them to own the equipment, but we would have to kind of get a final call on that.
Okay, our next question is from one of the potential partner cities, and they have supplied a list of vehicle specifications for you to look at. So I guess you can look at that later. We won't try to answer that right now. Our next question says, can EVSC funding be used for hybrid truck charging?
Well, again, the infrastructure is hopefully available to any type of vehicle that it's compatible with. So if it's a plug-in hybrid, it would, and it's compatible, then I can't see any reason why it would not be allowed.
Alrighty. Can the EVSC construction power be supplied by solar panels that would be funded under the project?
That one I think we'll need to take a look at. There is a precedent that the MSRC did fund EVSE, which had a solar charging component. However, I think in the same case, it would have to include the total program, meaning that have to include the chargers plus potentially a solar canopy. The solar canopy in and of itself would not be an eligible project. It would have to have the actual electric vehicle support equipment as a component.
Alrighty. Would an EV charger installation technical assistance program fit the project description? Rather than the city buy and install chargers, the city could contract with an expert to provide assistance to commercial or multi-dwelling unit property owners who want to install chargers? Question mark.
Yeah, I think in this case, the answer would need to be no. I think the real intent of the program is to have the actual EVSC, that is the electric vehicle support equipment, constructed or installed. So there would need to be a hardware component associated with the project, and as Cynthia mentioned, there could be limited program management costs, but again, I would not view them as being acceptable if they were excessive. So we can look at that on a case-by-case basis, but I can assure you that the intent of the program is to have EVSC constructed and physical charging units result from the MSRC funding contribution.
Okay. We seem to have a lot of interest in EVSC today.
That's good.
Do projects involving EVSC have to be located within the South Coast Air Quality Management District? Our county extends out of the basin and into Mojave Desert AQMD.
The chargers which were funded by the MSRC would need to be installed within the geographic jurisdiction of the South Coast Air Quality Management District. To amplify that, I mean, it doesn't mean that a larger program can't be in place by a city or a county, in this case a county. If they have a very large program and want to apply the MSRC set aside to that portion which is constructed within the geographical jurisdiction of the South Coast AQMD, that probably would be okay. But to actually have MSRC funds be used for EVSC outside the jurisdiction would not be an eligible project.
Will the webinar be available for viewing at a later time?
Is my understanding yes.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Cynthia?
And yeah, I know we have some questions in the audience here. So I don't know
You
if
want me to stop for a moment?
for a moment. Yeah, let's let the people who are here have a chance. Oh, sorry.
One is there going to be a requirement that the EVSCs be maintained as well as purchased and installed so that they're operable during a period of time?
Okay, let me just repeat. The question is there going to be required that the electric vehicle support equipment be maintained and operable for a certain period of time? Yes. MSRC generally requires an operational period. I would say just based on the past practice for the level 2 chargers, they would have to be kept operational for a minimum of 3 years.
Quick follow-up on the other one. If there were a solar charger, would the solar panel be considered part of the acceptable cost, or would that be excluded from the cost of purchasing and installing the EVSC?
Well, again, there's a past project that the MSRC did fund. It was in the city of Santa Monica, and the overall project was a set of EVSC chargers plus solar canopy, and that was deemed acceptable. So again, we'd have to probably look at the specific attributes of any project, but again, if it's a program which has physical EVSC charger units, and then a portion of the program is a solar canopy, again, there's a past precedent for allowing that to go forward. But again, we'd want to look at the total program, look at the scope of work, look how the costs are being allocated to. So again, I think that one would need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Yes, repowers are acceptable for. That's correct. Yeah, the question is, are repowers eligible? And the answer is yes. And the eligible costs for conducting a repower, and a repower is defined as taking out the old engine and putting in a new near zero engine. Typically, these are alternative fuel vehicles. This follow-on question was, are any other costs eligible? For this category, I think the main category or main subcategories of eligible costs would include the purchase of the engine and that engine's installation. I really can't think of anything that would be a cost element. I think, again, even the project management for something like that should be relatively minimal. I think disposal of the old engine should be borne by the program applicant.
Yes, design costs can be allowable, part of the allowable cost for EVSE installation, as long as they weren't doing the design before September 1st.
Okay, our next email question. Is there a list of improvements that qualify to the limited upgrades for TMCs?
No, traffic management centers would need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
All right. Last year, the city of Riverside, forget I said that. Last year, our city received grant approval for infrastructure expansion improvements. We are waiting for the agreement. However, the project has since expanded in scope. Can we apply for additional funds, reapply, or modify the grant request for additional funding to cover the changes in scope associated with the expansion?
I think that if they could identify, we'd have to look at it individually, but if we could identify what's the difference in the project from what was originally proposed to what they now want to do, that could be considered as an additional expansion project. So I think that it's probably feasible.
We have a very similar question following that one. If we have a project funded by a previous grant that needed additional funds, could we request the additional funds?
If the project hasn't changed, then the answer is certainly no.
I'm getting some requests for the materials that were discussed today, so I think we can say that those are going to be made available to everybody. Question. Are jurisdictions allowed to submit applications for more than one project? For example, purchase of an EV and EVSE?
Absolutely.
Another vehicle question. Are pilot/demo vehicles okay? That is, can we use funds to partner with an OEM to develop a new type of vehicle that doesn't currently exist on the market? For example, EV Class 8 street sweeper, EV top handler.
The electric vehicle top handler, that's a piece of cargo handling equipment that would be operated at a distribution center or a port for container movement. We'd need to look at that. I'm not saying no, but again, we'd need to understand where they are in the development, whether this is a project which is more towards the research and development or experimental side, or if it's going to be something that's very near to commercialization. And Matt, could you repeat the question for the first part of that?
Are pilot/demo vehicles okay?
Yeah, I think, again, the same answer is we'd need to look at the specific proposal. I don't want to say no, but we'd need to see where they are in the process of developing and commercializing that vehicle. And my hesitation is that if there's a vehicle which is going to be experimental, that has a potential for a very short life, then it probably would not be deemed eligible. What we're really trying to do are have vehicles deployed which are going to fulfill the operational life of the conventional fuel vehicle they're displacing.
Okay, a couple more questions, and I think we're caught up for now. Right, right. As part of your presentation, you noted that MSRC presentation must be presented to the City Council/Board of Supervisors by local government staff. Would there be any opportunity for AQMD staff to also be available at the meeting? Or would this actual webinar be recorded and posted to serve as background reference to city staff?
This webinar is going to be recorded and posted, is my understanding. I'm not sure how much the city council would want to watch all this. There may be some very limited opportunities in which some AQMD staff may be available, but I really don't think we can promise that.
Will there be a website that posts all the questions and answers that have been received on this program?
We have done some postings previously of a Q&A from other bidders workshops, so we can probably put something together on this one. It'll take a little while, though.
Okay, one more. Will the grant cover any operations/maintenance for EV infrastructure?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. If you could just pull up the presentation for the local governments to provide their. Last thing we're going to do during this webcast is to simply, go over very briefly the presentation that we've put together to assist the city and county staff to provide this to your council and/or board of supervisors. Again, it's very short, and if you've seen it already, you'll see it's pretty self-explanatory. But again, what I want to do is entertain any questions that you might have. There's just a few, again, key points that we'd like you to make on behalf of the MSRC. The first, of course, is, who is the MSRC and what our role is in helping the South Coast District achieve its clean air obligations. So the first slide simply talks about, very briefly, the role of the MSRC when we were enacted, et cetera. So again, this is just a very, very brief general overview of the MSRC and our mission. The second is to just make sure that the leadership of your city or county is aware of the is aware of the air quality challenges which are facing this region. This is has been adapted from the South Coast 2016 AQMP. And what we're really trying to show is that today, for ozone, which is a lung irritant and the primary constituent of formation of smog, that the South Coast region is still extreme non-attainment, which is pretty much as bad as you can get. So we just want to make sure that, again, everyone's aware that these challenges are real. And secondly, on the following slide, that the obligations to reduce ozone and its precursors, NOx, which is what comes out of the tailpipe of cars, trucks, and buses, is really essential. The point here on this slide simply is to show that by 2023, the South Coast District is obligated to reduce emissions of NOx, which again, precursor to ozone formation, by 45%. And that's again why we're focusing so strongly on those technologies which eliminate the tailpipe emissions, because again this is a very um, important and very difficult reduction to achieve in such a short time. The third slide, again, we'd just like the staff to talk briefly about where the strategies are included. Again, the South Coast AQMD has laid out a roadmap for reducing emissions of harmful air pollutants in their air quality management plan, which was published not that long ago, I think March of 2017. So the point here is just to say that the South Coast Air Quality Management District, which is the regulatory authority for air pollution reduction in the South Coast District, and implements the those strategies which are included in the state implementation plan. The MSRC is working with the district to focus on those strategies. So the AQMP, the Air Quality Management Plan, is truly the roadmap for how we're going to obtain the clean air obligations that we have. The next slide simply again is talking about how the MSRC wants to partner with the jurisdictions. Talks a little more about the AQMP strategies, and that the MSRC is setting aside funding specifically for you to help jumpstart some of these AQMP strategies. And finally, the last slide just talks about the opportunity that this is absolutely a voluntary program, but again, we're trying to provide incentives to encourage cities and counties to take some ownership of the air quality problem and implement those strategies, which again are going to be most effective in reducing air pollution. That's the presentation that we'd like you to make. As Cynthia mentioned, if you'd like to make some modifications to this, add additional information to talk about your specific project, we can certainly make this available to you as a Word, or I should say as a PowerPoint document. Then you can go in and do your necessary modifications or refinements to make it your own presentation. We're happy to do that. But again, this is the educational component of the program. And with that, I think that's all the actual materials we have for presentation today. If there's any additional questions, either in the studio audience or if there's anything that's come across the internet, we're more than happy to address them. Again, if we can't get to your question today, we certainly are available at any time to answer them. I know we've received some questions which are a little more detailed, and we'll have to do some staff work to address those, and we're happy to do that immediately. So Matt, are there any other final questions from the... No more? Okay. If there's no more questions here, then again, on behalf of the MSRC, thank you very much for participating today. We absolutely look forward to receiving your applications and working with you. And if anything comes up between now and the time you submit your application, by all means, feel free to pick up the phone or shoot us an email, and we'll be happy to address your needs as quickly as we can. So again, thank you very much, and have yourselves a great day.
Want to take some last minute?
Oh, spoke too soon. Sure, we'll take a last minute questions.
They just popped up, honest.
Sure.
Yeah. Eligibility requires 24-hour access to EVSE in order to qualify. Since in many cases these facilities would locate in public facility parking areas, for example, public parking structure that may not be open 24 hours and may need to be secured for a limited number of hours at night, say between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m., is the 24-hour requirement flexible at all to accommodate projects that may have limited closure hours?
Sure. Yeah, we've thought a lot about this, and the answer is no. Those are qualify as more of the private access, and the reason is this: we don't want to have someone who is driving an electric vehicle who finds themselves in need of charging show up and have the facility not available to them. We're really trying to promote the vehicle. We're trying to promote the technology, and we're trying to reduce impediments to having that technology be more widely adopted. So when the 24/7 requirement is really to have the vehicle operator have some assurance that if they show up and are in need of a charge, that site will be accessible to them. I do understand, of course, we all understand that certain sites can't stay open 24/7. That's understood. But again, there is a provision to accommodate those sites which can't be open 24/7.
And that's just what I was going to add when the question was posed in terms of eligibility. It doesn't mean that it's an ineligible project, but it would not be considered eligible to get the 75% match.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Is the funding under this PON a one-time allocation, or will this be an annual allocation?
This is a one-time allocation. This is the first time that the MSRC has decided to do something like this. Again, we certainly can't read the minds of the MSRC as to what they'll want to do in future work programs, but for right now, this is a one-time opportunity.
Will we need to submit emissions reductions data if we receive MSRC local government partnership funds for our project?
The answer is no, and staff will take care of that. It's really easy because if it's zero emission technology, well, that's easy to quantify, and if it's near zero, it's pretty close. So staff will, of course, we do quantify the reductions which are attributable to the projects the MSRC funds, but staff will reduce the burden on the cities and counties by taking that upon ourselves.
What is the timeline of application approval once the application is submitted?
The MSRC is going to be looking at applications throughout the period as they're received. So we don't have to wait until March 2nd before the MSRC starts looking at them. That being said, there's going to be a process. There's a subcommittee, and then the technical advisory committee, the MSRC, and finally the AQMD governing board for approval of awards. So probably a couple of months, all told, between when we receive the application and when an award might be finalized.
Rick?
No. The MSRC allocated enough for everybody to take advantage of the full amount that's set aside for them.
Any more questions? If not, again, thank you very much, and look forward to receiving your applications and any additional questions we receive in the interim. So again, thank you very much. Have a great day.